Okay, so welcome to today's independent living skills event called Get Out and Grow. And this is for gardening for people with disabilities, but that could be applied to anyone because a lot of it's just a universal design concept, and which is the best concept because that means anyone can use the space, including people with disabilities. So the focus for today is accessible gardening, and with planning, the garden experience can be adapted and accessible for everyone. And accessible gardening does not start in the garden. Where do you think it starts? Shannon's thinking.
When
I can
you plan?
see kind of. So
in the
just
home?
like anything else that has to do with disability, in my mind, it all starts with attitude. So accessible gardening starts with how we perceive disability in everyday life and activities. So the overall goal of making the gardening experience accessible for as many people as possible is to make it an inclusive experience. So changing how we perceive disability in everyday life and activities is a starting point to enjoy the calm and gratification that gardening can provide. But once again, just like anything else, if you have the expectation that you can't or shouldn't do something, then you probably won't. But if we normalize the experience for everyone, then it becomes more accessible for everyone. So basically, in a nutshell, with accessible gardening, in some planning, smart designs, if you need the physical barriers minimized, adaptive tools, and a sensible, safety-oriented routine can make gardening accessible and fun. I always liken gardening to a relationship, and it's kind of obvious why, but gardening is your relationship to the natural world, and just like any other relationship, it requires tending. So you can't neglect a garden once planted, just as you can't neglect any other important relationship. But unlike most relationships, a garden has seasons, and there's times of rest and there's times of resurgence. We're in spring, which is the natural time for people to start thinking about growing things. It's the natural planting season. So the important thing is to embrace all seasons. Your garden is going to have times of dormancy. Just like we need rest, your garden needs rest. But this time of year, when it's time to start sowing the seeds and making your plan, this is the perfect time to do it. Now, the thing about the garden is it's individual for everybody. And so when you think about a garden, I want you to think of it as your garden. So it's your garden. And so I think a lot of people think of gardening in general in grandiose terms, well, I should plant this, or I need to plant that, or I've got to be good at this, and I need a green thumb. But the truth is, your garden can be as simple as herbs on a windowsill, or it can be an acre of vegetables. It's your garden. So you get to choose what you can do and what you can't do. It's a personal experience, and it always starts with an idea that you grow with. And so how does your garden grow? Every garden needs a few essential things. It needs dirt, usually, unless it's a hydroponic garden. It needs sunshine, water, fertilizing, and tending. And the quality of those things will influence the outcome. So if you have poor dirt, lack of sunshine, not enough water, or too much water, over fertilizing or under fertilizing or neglecting your garden, it will influence the outcome. If you plan ahead and you supplement your dirt, you make sure you're planting in the right type of light for the plant that you've chosen, then there's a better chance that your garden is going to flourish and it will have a better outcome. I like this quote. I chose it just because I think it was kind of fitting. So it says, "The glory of gardening is hands in the dirt, head in the sun, heart with nature. To nurture a garden is to feed not just the body, but the soul." And that quote was attributed to someone named Alfred Austin, who I found several quotes by. So that person must know what they're talking about, right? It's the internet, so we got to trust it. Every garden starts with planting seeds. And so there are literal seeds, that you buy in a Well, unless you're buying a start. So a start is a plant that's already been started for you, but that plant also starts from seeds. So when you're planting the seeds, you're also planting your plan. So you want to ask yourself a few questions. What do I want to grow? Do I want to grow flowers, vegetables? Do I want to grow weeds? You're going to grow weeds either way. Just by the way, you're going to grow weeds. That happens, whether you're growing flowers or vegetables, and you can grow both. Where do I want to grow it? Is the space accessible to me? Why do I want to garden? Is it because I think I need to? Or is this something that I really want to do? Do I want to commit the time and energy to planting and tending a garden? And who do I want to garden with? Children are great to garden with. It teaches them a lot of things, gets them outside, gets you outside, sunshine, fresh air. It helps them learn how to tend a garden, which is a good life lesson in general. And you can garden with a friend or a pet or by yourself. It's something that you can customize to your lifestyle, your family, and your particular situation. A lot of people, when they're considering gardening, they think, well, what if I fail? And my question is always, well, what if you don't? And by the way, every gardener fails. There isn't a single person out there who's growing things that hasn't had a bad outcome. And the nice thing about gardens is that they're multi-sensory. They involve all the senses: touch, smell, sound, sight, and taste. So the person who's deaf can enjoy a garden. A person who is blind can enjoy a garden because they're multi-sensory. They're not reliant on one sense more than another. There are all kinds of different garden types. So it will kind of depend on your space or your goals for your garden, what kind of garden you choose, and or your physical mobility. There's a windowsill garden, which is one of the ways that a lot of people actually start their gardening journey. That's kind of they discover the joy of it or the peace of it, or just the beauty of having plants in their home. And it's a simple thing to do. If you've got a windowsill and some light, you just need to find the plants that will fit there. A lot of herb gardens are started that way. And you can always start your herb garden on a windowsill and then move them to a container outside or into a garden bed. Another type of garden is a raised garden. And the raised gardens are specifically helpful for people who can't bend over for long periods of time, or wheelchair users, or if you're using another mobility aid, anything that makes it difficult for you to get down on the ground or bend over. Raised gardens are a wonderful solution. And along those same lines actually is a tabletop garden, which is similar, except you're not necessarily building a raised garden. You're using a tabletop, which is suitable for the outdoors, and you can put containers on it or a window box, that kind of thing. And that's actually the next thing is container gardens, which is my favorite because I have really sandy soil where I live. So containers are easier to modify the soil in. You've got a smaller space to do that. They're adaptable, they're movable, and you can change them more easily from year to year. The real investment is just the containers themselves, which you can get at thrift stores, yard sales, or even the less expensive ones at Dollar Tree and Family Dollar, places like that. And another nice thing is hanging baskets. People don't necessarily think of hanging baskets as a garden, but it actually can be, especially if you put them in multiple locations, and they can be really beautiful. And it's not exclusive to flowers. You can actually plant vegetables, some fruits like strawberries and other berries in hanging baskets. So it's kind of fun. So out of all of these, windowsill, raised, tabletop, container, or hanging baskets, which one do you think you would like to try?
For me, I think a mixture of two, which would be the one in the windowsill. I'm sorry, Sabrina, and then probably the tabletop one, just to get me started.
I'm intrigued by the tabletop too, because it
Yeah.
seems a lot simpler than building a raised bed. That seems like way
Mm-hmm.
more of a commitment.
Yeah.
What do you think, Maggie?
I like the hanging baskets, or I like having the window box where it's on the outside of the window, but you feel like it's right there.
Mhm.
Even though I can't
Yeah.
see through the window, I don't know, I just feel like it's close by.
It's outside but close by. That actually makes
Yeah.
sense. What about you, Shannon?
Well, unfortunately, I don't do really any gardening here because my parents do all the gardening. So we have a ton already.
That just sounds like an excuse to me.
What do
Well,
y'all have in your
I
garden,
would
Shannon?
do it if we didn't, but we have a ton of plants like all over the place. And
What
the
kind of
garden and my
plants?
and
Yeah, what
well,
kind of plants do y'all have?
it's hard to I forget. We like I said, we have all different kinds. I know my mom
Okay.
also just got a whole bunch of cactuses.
Oh, wow.
We also just planted some stuff in the little area we have in the front of the house. My
Yeah.
step my stepfather just actually just started, and I think he's just finished or he's still in the middle of doing the gardening in the backyard.
Yeah.
That's
So there's
interesting though,
already a
Shannon.
lot going on here.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And you just reminded me of something. Some people are actually opting to use their front yards, that would usually
The
be
little
just
beds, yeah.
decorative and grass,
Uh-huh.
what you're wasting a lot of water on. And they're
Yeah.
either creating a portion of those and using that as a vegetable garden or, more of a functional garden. And I know that, and I'm not really sure why this is the case. It's kind of disappointing that some places frown upon that, neighborhood associations,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because
Well,
it
we
doesn't
don't have it
fit
in our
their,
actual. We
yeah.
don't actually have it in our actual yard. It's like where our front porch is. There's a little to the left where we have a little sidewalk connected to the porch,
Mhm.
and then we
Mm-hmm.
have a little dirt area right to the side on the left as you're coming out of the and as you're going out to the yard. There's a little dirt area where there's some plants, a little bit of plants in there.
Yeah, but it's still a little bit unconventional because it's in the front. Most
Yeah.
people think of their gardens as always the backyard or somewhere
Yeah.
that's, less obvious that the front yard is supposed to be more decorative rather than functional. But I think it can be both. And I think gardens are beautiful. And
Yeah, I
if
have
you're
a
a
friend
really
that
good
has a
gardener, you absolutely can make it beautiful.
I had a friend who was she liked plants and she just had them all over her apartment on the outside. And you're right, they frowned upon that and told her she needed to take it down because she had like 20 or 30. And so that was a extreme. And she
An
needed to get it
eyesore.
from in front of her, yeah, in front of her apartment door like
Oh,
that.
neighborhood
And she was so funny
associations.
because she had different ones. She had, I think it was one that count like an Easter one year at Easter, I think a palm or whatever. And that one was her special one. She would actually give it bottled water. She said, "Oh no, she gets bottled water." I thought that was so funny. She
I've
said, "Oh
heard that
no,
too.
that one gets bottled water. She's special." And I said, "Oh wow," but she was one of the driving force that made me get a hanging plant at one point. And I have never. I got a black thumb. I have no green thumbs at all. All of mine they just die. My house temperature is not right or whatever. So I had this one plant and it grew and grew and grew. And I had it in a hanging basket. I had it on my screen and porch. And I'm talking about it went from the plant and it started coming down and down. And I was so proud of that plant. And lo and behold, it was a freezing night and I forgot to bring it in. Boy, that hurted
Oh,
me. I have never grew anything like that again. I said, I don't
oh,
even like it. Everybody said, what happened to your plant? I said, I forgot. It just was not on my radar to bring it in. It was so cold. And I got an aunt who swears by, she said, I should have gave it an aspirin or put eggshells in it. And they the
well,
type that talk to
you
their
learned a
plants too.
lesson though, and that's part of the trick to gardening is just forgiving yourself for things like
Yeah.
that. And we all do that. I've done that before. And the next morning I wake up, I'm like, oh no.
Uh-huh.
And
Yes.
you're heartbroken. But the beautiful thing
Exactly. Yeah,
about
that's the
plants
first
is
thing
you
ever.
can always start over.
And that was the first time
Andrea,
I ever had
are you
something
there?
that grew.
I am, and I'm a windowsill seed starter myself. I do like to do that.
It
Yeah.
is fun. Do you propagate plants too on the windowsill?
Sometimes, yeah. Actually, I just clipped some wild wisteria yesterday, which I'm gonna try to start at home. Yeah, I need some soil. I thought I had soil, and I realized that I used it to fill in some of my holes that my Labradors like to dig in my yard. So I need to buy another bag of soil.
And you have to be careful when you have plants. That's a really good point. If you're planting things that could potentially be toxic to animals, you might want to take that into consideration. Um, if you're going to have a pet in the same area as your garden, or a pet that likes to chew and dig on plants. And you can't do anything about wildlife. They tend to be smarter than our pets. So, you know, if you do plan to have a pet, there are certain types of plants that you don't want to plant in your garden, just because it's not.
And also another good tip too is if you're doing a garden or any kind of gardening in the backyard, to be careful too, because armadillos being very popular in Savannah, they will come and destroy and eat the garden.
Oh,
Yeah, and that's going to happen with pests, and you've got to forgive that situation too. And there are some areas that are more prone. Like my yard, there are certain things I just won't even try to grow because I have the squirrel troop back there. It's an entire village of squirrels that are very spoiled, that are used to coming in my yard and getting those little stinkers. I buy coleus every single year. So of course I bought it again this year, and I put it in the back, and I found the squirrel sitting on the edge of the container, just chomping away at it like it was a salad bar.
Oh,
I
wow.
couldn't believe it. I'm like, okay, no, this isn't gonna work for me, Mr. Squirrel. It's probably the one that does backflips in the backyard, Sabrina.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
I didn't even know they ate coleus. And so yeah, this was an eye opener for me. And I'm like, I hope it gives you a stomach ache.
Is that
And what
a
are
plant
coleus?
or
Yeah, what's that?
It's actually a variegated plant usually, and they come in different colors, and it gets nice and bushy every year. It's an annual. You replant it every year, it doesn't come back.
Oh, okay.
So I just like the way it looks, and it does well in my backyard because of the mixture of light and shade. And so I plant it every year. But yeah, this year it's been deemed a smorgasbord by the
Squirrels.
squirrels. So I'm not really sure. Bless you, Maggie. I'm not really sure that I'm gonna keep it, but I'm gonna try. Okay. So for I kind of broke this down into just two basic things. The first is gardening for people who are blind and low vision, and that's in part because of who I know would be in the workshop. And so, as I said earlier, gardening it's a full body experience. It can stimulate all of your senses, but it also can boost your physical and mental health. And with a few tricks to accommodate for vision loss or people who are blind and low vision, it's totally doable. It's an adaptable thing. And so there's 5 basic steps, and anyone that's interested can delve a little bit deeper into those. So gardening for people who are blind and low vision is you basically just want to choose plants that make you happy. You know, plants that you're going to enjoy having around, plants that smell lovely or feel nice when you touch them, or something that you're going to eat. You know, whatever makes you happy and it's suitable in your zone, go for it. The other thing is you're going to want to spend time in the area where you're considering having your garden to know when and where it's sunny. You know, if you're outside and you sense that you're in the shade, you're going to want to, and it's there most of the day, you're going to want to try to plan that way. If it's super sunny, you're going to want to plan for that. So just get to know the actual area and spend time with it to know where you think things could go, and then have symmetry to that, and it'll help you remember what's planted where. So if you kind of create the design in your mind, know where things are going to go, the symmetry is actually really helpful. And like I said, you're going to do research so that any plants that you choose are suited for your location and then for your zone. So planting zones in the United States are broken up. And so we're in 8B. Georgia's 8B. So you're not going to plant the same things in 8B that you're going to do in a zone that's a 4. So if you're in, you know, Washington State, you're definitely not going to plant the same things that well, not necessarily. Some plants cross over and they have wider zones, but for the most part, we're pretty tropical. So we're actually pretty lucky, and we can grow a lot of things here. I don't rely on my own ability to understand what's what. And the tags, they're not accessible, but I'm sure that there's apps that can tell you which plants are for your zone. And you can always ask your local garden center or an experienced gardener, not me. I'm the garden rookie, for advice. And then know the feel of your plants. Get to know how they feel when they're growing, so that when you weed, you can tell the difference between what you planted and what's a weed, and you can pull your weed.
do those zones depend on what can actually grow or?
Sure, yeah. And there's always going to be weeds. I mean, you'd have to be really diligent to never have weeds or be using horrible weed killers, which is not environmentally friendly. And sometimes it's necessary for pest control and weed control, but you want to always minimize your use of things like that.
No, I mean, I was talking about the zones that you were talking about. Is that based on what can actually grow or not? Or?
The zones are based on your geographical location.
But is that also meaning that what's going to actually, what plants will actually grow and what won't, and which ones won't?
Yeah, so you're not going to plant, like, if we lived in Wisconsin, for instance, you're not necessarily going to plant things that grow well here. In other words, there's tropical things that are tropical that would not sustain a winter there, that needs a longer growing season, and vice versa. You know, there are things that grow up there that would not grow here because it's just not suitable. Plants, like people, like particular climates. They like the climates that are comfortable for them and that they can thrive in. And if you don't have that climate, the plant won't thrive or grow at all. So for accessible garden, and this is specific to people who are with mobility disabilities and wheelchair users, one of the obvious things is just to make room for your wheelchair or other mobility aid. Make sure that the paths are flat and hard and at least 3 feet wide to accommodate your wheelchair. Paved paths are ideal, but we can't always do that. So you want to at least have your grass mowed and dirt paths even and well maintained. Raised beds, like I said, are a really cool idea, and it enables gardeners who use a wheelchair to work on a garden without having to bend over for long periods of time. And it also lets you reach your plants and tend your plants, because that's something you absolutely have to do. And there's specifications for raised beds, just like there are for any other physical barriers for wheelchair users. And so what they recommend is a height of 28 to 30 inches. That way you can kind of get under it and you can get to it. You can still get to it to water it. In other words, it's not so deep that you can't reach across the whole bed. That's key too. And that's just helpful for people that really have a hard time bending over, or have bad knees, or that are just not comfortable bending. I think they're great. I would love to have one, if not for the squirrels. There's what we mentioned earlier was the tabletop gardens, and that's just raised beds that are elevated and with enough room underneath to accommodate a chair, but are a flat surface. Now you can put a container on it that's like a raised bed, but it's movable. You can then move that somewhere else, and then you can change what's on it a little bit more easily. You want to lighten your load, minimize the work in your garden by planting more perennials. Those are the ones that come back every year, unless you become a proficient gardener and you just prefer the annuals. But when starting out, I think you would enjoy the perennials more because they come back every year. Another nice thing to do is to mulch. It helps keep the moisture in, and it helps decrease the need for weeding. So that's an upkeep thing. So lighten your load. Container gardening, like I said, that's my favorite. And you can grow plants and vegetables and flowers in pots and other types of containers. And you can do that without undue strain. You can put them elevated as well. And you can also change them from year to year and move them from place to place. I think they're the most flexible. And definitely a good tip if you have bad soil, like I do. And then we're going to get into more of this, but purchasing adapted gardening tools is key. And I think I've got a whole, let me see, I've got a whole nother page. Yeah, so I'm going to go to a whole page of tools. And there's actually a video I'm going to play, and this dude's going to talk about individual things, but basically my idea of a tool in a garden is anything that helps you complete the task. But in addition to the tools that he's going to talk about and some other things, you should also be sure in your toolbox to include sunscreen, bug repellent, a hat, which I'm wearing, by the way. I've got my garden hat on, or a visor, sunglasses, gloves for sure, knee pads and proper footwear, and be sure to drink plenty of water. Stay hydrated, don't get overheated. Those are also things for your toolbox. But I'm going to play the video real quick, give my voice a break, and see what this guy has to say about adaptive tools.
Hi, today we're talking about ergonomic tools that you might be able to use in your garden. And we're here with Joe Young. Joe's with Agribility Virginia. Hey, Joe, how are you?
Fine, Chris. How you doing today?
Fine. Thanks for coming out here and talking with us today about some tools and your program. What does Agribility do?
Agribility is a program that's funded by USDA through land-grant universities. Virginia Tech is at land-grant university in Virginia.
Okay.
And the program is implemented through a service agency, which is Easter Seals. So it's a joint effort between Tech and Easter Seals in terms of reaching out to the farming community, but we also work with gardeners who have limitations as well.
Gotcha. So it's not just for farmers, although you work with farmers with combines and big equipment, but you also, a lot of the tools we're going to talk about today are adaptable to anybody that's gardening.
Anybody that's gardening, which is a aspect of farming.
Right.
Yeah.
And so people that might have a disability or have gotten older or some sort of limitation, some of these can help them with some of those things.
Oh yes, can help tremendously. This is an ergonomic tool, which means a tool that's different than the kind of tools that you normally would find on the market.
Okay.
And they are designed specifically with people who have limitations.
Okay.
For example, if you had a problem with your joints and your wrist,
Right.
you use this type of adaptation
Right.
with this tool where you slide that on and it keeps your arm straight and your wrist straight, which takes the pressure off your joints.
And then that cuff would be adaptable to all these different types of tools that we have
yes,
here.
it would be adaptable to all of them. Some of them are longer handle
Right.
because you use longer handle tools for certain operations.
Right.
And then some have shorter handles because you use shorter tools in other settings.
So that makes sense. And I can see that with this right here. This is kind of a relatively short tool, but you were telling me earlier, this just opens up and extends.
Yes, this is a telescopic hoe and rake.
Right.
And so what you do if maybe someone is sitting and working so they don't have to have a long reach,
Right.
so you can just adapt this and pull it in and use it as a short handle tool.
And then I see this here, it's got kind of a long handle. This is for getting rid of weeds, right? Kind of moving it back and forth.
Yes, yeah.
But I noticed you were showing me earlier, this comes off here, this handle.
It comes off. Yeah.
And then again, that can go on a trowel to make it a longer handle,
Right.
or some of these other cultivators, even a rake. And I see this one here, like we talked about before with that cup, but it's built into this.
That's built in, so you don't have to add anything to it.
Right.
Just go in and
So if somebody had carpal tunnel, some of these kind of things would help them with
yes,
that.
it would help a great deal.
Well, I see you also have a long-handled piece for this, those same ends right here.
Yes, which will give you a greater reach. It's also easy on your back, so you can use any of these tools on this longer handle, and you can stand and take pressure off your back as you reach out. So it's keep you from bending and keep the pressure off your knees.
Joe, for some people, getting up and down, mobility that way is difficult. What kind of things do you use in that situation to help growers?
Yeah, there are different things that you can use. For example, this is one of the tools that you can use, which is a gardening tool that you can sit on, a gardening cot.
Right.
And it has directional movement where you can
Steer the wheels, basically.
go in a direction you would like. You can sit in one spot and work,
Right.
which makes a difference because a lot of people have knee problems, hip problems, or back problems, and problems getting up and down.
That makes sense.
So that's one of the tools that's available.
I see one here. It's a seat. It's kind of lightweight that you can just sit on and scoot it real quick and move around the garden.
It's very lightweight, and because people don't have the ability to lift heavier things.
Right.
And so this makes a difference in terms of how they're able to work with the tools.
And I noticed this is something you could sit on or kneel. Maybe even you can turn this over and kneel on it.
You can turn it over, kneel on it. It becomes a kneeler
Right.
for people who have back problems, hip problems.
Right.
And they can kneel and do the work. If they want to use it as a seat, you can turn it up the other way, and then you can sit on it.
Right.
And also work with your tools from a sitting position. These tools are available at local hardware stores, some of them. Others you can find online by going online and Googling online, and you'll find the vendors out there that specialize in these particular tools.
Great. Thanks so much for talking with us again today, Joe. We really
Okay, so that was hopefully descriptive enough that you got a pretty good idea about what he was talking about. Some of the things that I thought was beneficial is that obviously you can customize it to what's helpful for you. Like I said, anything that helps you complete the task is the tool for you. And so just as a recap, some of those things would be easy grip pruners, things with telescoping handles that prevents you from having to reach quite as far or to reach things that you couldn't reach at all. Cushioned gloves is something they didn't mention that I think is particularly helpful for some things. If you're going to do something repetitive, to have gloves that have a little bit of cushion to protect your hands and just let you be out there and enjoy it longer. The stools and the knee pads, one of the things that he was showing was a stool that you have it in one direction where the legs are kind of the long way, and that would be a stool. And then when you flip it over, the legs become handles, and then there's a secondary cushioned part on the bottom that you could then kneel on. I think that that's amazing. And it looked like, I'm not 100% sure, but it looked like the legs could probably be collapsed so that you could store it easier. But I'm not 100% sure because he only showed it when it was in the up position. I thought that was really cool. Another thing are small wagons versus wheelbarrows, because I don't know about you, but I always lose control of wheelbarrows when I try to use them. Self-coiling hoses is another thing where I think one of the things about them too is they're lighter weight. So even when they're not, you're not trying to coil them, moving them around the yard or taking them from place to place, it's a little less cumbersome. And then they're self-coiling. Once they're turned off and there's no longer water in the hose, they coil back into their position. So anyway, choosing the right tool is key, obviously, but also maintaining your tools. So once you have your tools and you've started your garden, just like the garden itself, you want to make sure that you're tending your tools and you're making sure that things need to be clean and oiled and kept up are kept up. And like I said, be safe. Wear non-slip closed-toed shoes, drink water, use sunscreen, bug repellent, a hat, all those good things. And Denise has joined us. Hey, Denise. So gardening benefits us in a lot of ways. It benefits us mentally, physically, emotionally, and some would say spiritually. I certainly agree with that. And when you're out in nature or in the garden, you're not thinking about the stresses of the day, or if you're thinking about them, they're not at the forefront of your mind. Typically, when you're out there tending a garden, it's taking all your attention. And it's giving you an opportunity to take a breather from the stresses of the day, and even small gardens can do that. I think it's just the activity of stepping out and away from the stresses, stepping into nature. That's the key. You don't have to do anything elaborate. You don't have to do anything perfectly. Thank goodness, because I would have given up long ago. It's just important to get out and to step away. This is actually a self-care activity that if you embrace it, it can be really addictive. And I think most gardeners would agree. So even the most seasoned gardeners, of course, experience varying outcomes in the garden, but every attempt is a success because you're either succeeding in growing or you're succeeded in learning. Either way, keep it manageable, have fun with it, but please get out and grow. So what do you think? Will you give it a try?
I think I will try. I have in the past and haven't been super great, but I'm motivated to try it again.
Woohoo!
Yes, I will try. I want a herb garden.
Herbs, yeah,
Those are
absolutely.
fun.
It's a great way to start, and they're edible. So
Yeah.
that makes it even more fun. What kind of herbs do you think you would start with, Sabrina?
Probably basil and somebody had is it a mint one, a mint garden? One of my
Mm.
friends, yeah, they had mint, basil, and like my sister, they do tomatoes, cucumbers, and the bigger things. But I think I'll start small and see how it goes. And if I enjoy it, it'd be that's something I could see myself doing as a relaxation type thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I'd be laid with the big hat in the garden with her little shovel and my gloves. And see my granddaughter, her other grandmother does that. And she always come and tell me, "Oh, we got this, Gigi, we got that." And she said, "I don't know what." She's so funny because she said, "I don't know what is going on with my azaleas." I said, "What?"
Oh, that is precious.
Yeah, the way she said it at that time, she was like 8. She said, "I don't know
Azaleas.
what's going on."
Uh,
Okay, then. Yeah,
Kids
so
do really do tend to embrace it, and this is
yeah.
actually an activity that's really beneficial.
And her grandmother
Dip,
does it to let her get used to eating different vegetables too.
there you
And she
go.
said the more she see and raise
Yep.
it, she'd be like, "Oh, we got to see how these come out. We got to taste those." So it gives her a little bit of excitement about the
Kids are
different
way more
vegetables.
likely to experiment with foods that they grow.
Yeah,
Even if they spit them out, at least they're going to try them. And so if you're going to do a kid-friendly garden, there are things that kids tend to like better. They'll
yeah,
like carrots,
carrot, yeah,
peas, things like that, things that kids would normally enjoy. It's a good kids garden, and they love butterfly gardens. Kids do,
hmm
where you plant things that attract pollinators. So there's all kinds of things you can do. And for kids that have IDD and autism, ADHD, it tends to be a really positive experience, and it's also an experience that you can modify based on their natural disposition, and the same thing for adults. But it is important to include other people in your garden. Some people really prefer it as a solitary endeavor, and some people just really like to share the experience, and that's why there's things like community gardens. It's not
hmm
just because of the gardening space that's beneficial, it's actually the community associated
yes,
with it. People that can get together, that are like-minded, that have the same joy, and they learn from each other, they can talk to each other. So there can be a lot of community associated with it. And if you've ever sat down with gardeners that talk to each other, yeah, it can be really boring and really interesting at the same
yeah,
time.
yeah.
But you
They
do
have
always
such.
learn something. If you're willing to listen, it definitely is something that you can learn from. I think don't think I had anything else specifically other than asking you all if you would, kind of give it a try and what your ideas are. Now, there's a lot more information. We just kind of touched the surface on some of these ideas as far as adaptable tools. And I think if you're really considering it, you're going to want to be realistic with yourself. What do you need? In other words,
hmm
and it's a tool that would work for you. It might not never, you might put it away, collects dust, you never use it because you didn't really think it through. Is this something that I really need? I wouldn't say break the bank. If you're going to do this, start small and just give yourself an opportunity to grow with the concept of gardening, just like the plants. You're just going to kind of tend to the process and be open-minded and be willing to fail. That's kind of just the natural part of gardening. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do things like leave your plant outside, and when it gets cold, when you should have brought it in, that kind of thing. It happens. So give yourself some grace, move on, have fun, and just get out and grow. Even Shannon, we're going to talk. We're going to talk him into growing an herb. I think a little dill, something that'll really do the trick.
Like I said, there's enough going on around here
She's like,
already.
you could grow some
Well, they
cabbage.
need to put
And
you in
Bell
charge of one
peppers,
of them.
yeah.
Yeah, put him in
Homegrown
charge of
bell
one of the
peppers are
things.
really yummy.
Yeah.
grow some. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to stop the recording because we've pretty much come to the end of the presentation.